sorry for the lack of seats. If there's anybody from the agency or perhaps any of the people that are in the audience that are here for something other than wildlife management, we're going to do wildlife management first. And if you don't want to sit through that and would be willing to give up your seat, I think we have a few people that are wanting to be in here. You might want to, if you want to step out, that's fine. I'm not asking you to, but if you're here for wildlife management, then you need to stick around. I want to welcome you all to the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting. Today's August 22nd, 2013. It's a committee day. My name is Jeff McMillan, and I'm the chairman. I'm going to ask Ms. Barber first to have a roll call, please.
Jim Bledsoe. Here. Harold Cannon. Here. Bill Cox. Here. Jeff Griggs. Here. Jeff McMillan. Here. Tom Rice. Here. Jim Ripley.
Here.
Julie Schuster. Clayton Stout. James Stroud. Here. Trey Teague.
Here.
Jamie Woodson. We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any announcements before we get started by Director Carter or any of the commissioners? We good? Okay. I'd like to welcome all our guests that are here. We have quite a few. There's a pad going around for y'all to sign in. If you'd like to speak, please indicate that you would. We're willing to hear any and all people that have a wish to speak to the commission. I do ask that if you're not on the agenda and you want to speak, I ask you that you hold your hand up, and we'll invite you to come forward. And I want you to address your questions to the commission, to the chairman of the particular committee that we're involved in, or to myself. I think the way we want to handle it today, because we have so many people that want to speak in the wildlife management part of our meeting, I would like to maybe restrain from asking questions to the person talking until all of the people that want to talk have talked, because otherwise I think that we'll get so bogged down even maybe with the first speaker. So I think we let everybody speak their piece, and at the end we'll have a question and answer session before we decide to go to vote. I do want to remind everybody that today is a committee day, and the commissioners that are on the Wildlife Committee will be the ones that will be voting on any proposals that we have, and that actually tomorrow is when we actually do the final vote for, that we would rule on. I do reserve the right to limit any of our speakers to a reasonable amount of time. We'd like to, I know a couple of people that have asked to speak wanted at least 10 minutes. If we could refrain from anybody individually that wants to talk, if we could kind of keep it to 5 minutes. We want to move through this, but I want to make sure we give everybody a reasonable and an ample time to speak. So at this time, we're going to go start with our Wildlife Management Committee. Now I want to do one other thing. I want to recognize two people. I want to recognize Mike Hayes, who's an ex-commissioner, is driven here from Reelfoot Lake. And I also want to recognize our newest commissioner, Mr. David Watson. He's from Lookout Mountain, Tennessee. He's right down here. And the only reason I can see that we have this many people here is David must have a big fan club, so we appreciate you bringing your friends. So at this time, we're going to start with wildlife management, and I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Trey Teague.
Thank you, Chairman McMillan. I'm Trey Teague. I'm the chair of the Wildlife Management Committee. This may be redundant. I'd just like to remind the commissioners that obviously everyone's allowed to join discussions today, but only the Wildlife Management Committee may vote. And that is myself, Tom Rice, Jim Bledsoe, James Stroud, Bill Cox, and David Watson. Tomorrow the committee will present our recommendations, and obviously all commissioners will participate and vote. At this time, I'd like to ask Daryl Radijak to come forward and discuss Tennessee elk permit recipients.
Thank you, Commissioner Teague. Where's the, oh, there we go. I come before the commission today to do an announcement of the 2013 North Cumberland elk hunt winners. We conduct a drawing every year for for 4 individuals to participate in the elk hunt that is offered on this WMA. We've been doing it since 2009, and unfortunately, with all the other business that's going on today, I'm hoping this doesn't get lost in the shuffle, but this is a great honor for those selected to participate in this hunt. It's an actual dream hunt. We have a very good success rate. In fact, the 6 individuals who participated in last year's hunt all were successful, and my job today is to announce the winners of the 2013 elk hunt. Before I get into that, there's one thing I wanted to inform the commission, which the agency did this past year, which I think was an excellent move. If you looked historically as far as the elk hunt goes from 2009 all the way up to 2012, we were receiving less and less monies for the auction tag that we give out, and we're also having less and less participation in the actual drawing. And one of the things that we did this past year, beginning in 2013, is we moved the application period for the elk hunt off of its traditional April and May time period, and we set it so it coincided with the WMA big game hunt drawing. And we had fantastic results. In 2012, these are just the elk applicants. In 2012, we had just over 6,000 people put in for the elk hunt on North Cumberland. Since we moved that drawing period from April to July, we increased the number of applicants from just over 6,000 to well over 10,000 applicants. So it was about a 75% increase in the number of people putting in for the elk hunt. So we're very pleased with that move. The one thing I wanted to announce, in case anyone was not aware, we have already conducted our elk conservation tag auction. This is a tag that is given to a NGO that is specifically designated to raise money for the elk program, and they typically put that tag up on eBay and they auction it off. This year the tag went to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation. They fortunately have received that tag, I believe, 4 out of the 5 years it has been offered. And this year's tag was no different. Just like the application period saw an increase in the participation for that elk drawing, we actually received more monies. The winning bid went to a Tommy Dale of Knoxville, and he bid $8,700 for this elk tag. Keep in mind that the 10% will go back to the foundation to recoup the monies that they spent on auctioning off the tag, so that the agency will receive approximately $8,000 that will benefit the elk program, specifically for this one tag that was auctioned off. Now, just rolling right into the 2013 North Cumberland elk hunt, the drawing winners for this year, and there's 4 adults that have been selected for this year's drawing. And I'm not doing the drum roll like we did last year. The first one is Timothy R. Collins of Cookeville, Tennessee. The second is James McDonald III of Knoxville. The third is Ronnie E. Gibson of Soddy Daisy, which is down south towards Chattanooga. And the last one is Michael W. Graves, who is from Lebanon, which is in Middle Tennessee. And congratulations to those 4. What we will do, we will hand these names over to personnel in Region 4, and they will contact these individuals today to make them aware that they've been selected for the 2013 Tennessee elk hunt on North Cumberland. Now, one of the things that the commission did last year was they created a youth elk tag. And this tag was to go to one of the Tennessee, it was to go to a Tennessee youth between the ages of 13 to 16 and hopefully recruit some really interested youngsters into elk hunting. And last year's tag, that's a picture of Jessica Parkins, who won the first ever elk tag last year, and she tagged out a really nice bull. And we conducted the drawing again this year. And this year, the winner for the youth tag is Laurel A. Allen from Jacksboro, Tennessee, which is really close to North Cumberland. Laurel is the second female to be selected for the youth tag. So this individual will also be contacted, and we'll start making arrangements to get all the elk winners on board and get them all set for their 2013 hunt of a lifetime. Does anyone have any questions? That is all I have for the elk.
Next, I'd like to move to waterfowl and introduce Dr. Gray Anderson, Assistant Chief, Wildlife Division.
Thank you, Commissioner. Put together a pretty simple presentation for us today. There's not a lot to talk about in the standard late season waterfowl process. Everything is extraordinarily good right now. We're on a great run. I think this is our 17th year of great numbers of birds on the prairies and also great pond conditions. So the spring or the summer counts look at about 45 million birds were counted this year, which is down from the previous year, but still 33% up over our long-term average. So the birds overall are doing fantastically. And so when you run all of these base numbers through the federal framework, the adaptive harvest process, we end up with a 60-day season, the liberal package with a 60-day season and 6 ducks in the bag. So what does that mean for our season? It really means what we're proposing at this point in time is mostly just day shifts, exactly what we had last year, and accounting for calendar year shifts. We had some minor bag limit changes on some of our species, and then the most important thing that's going on with our waterfowl hunters and the waterfowl bag limits is possession limit liberalizations, which we'll talk about at the very end of this. Just run through our day changes for Coots, Mergansers, rails, gallinules, moorhens, etc. Our real foot zone is going to be recommended for the 16th and 17th of November, and then the final 58 days of that season will be the November 30th through January 26th. The remainder of the state will open on November 28th and run through January 26th. Looking at our Canada Goose zone, real similar to a real foot zone, but a little bit larger. Our Northwest zone, we're going to have an October 12th through 17, November 16, 17, back to our standard days, and then the other November 30 through February 8. The remainder of the state is going to have that early opportunity, October 12 through 29, and then late season, remainder 60 days, the 28th of November through January 26th. Here's our goose. I'm not going to run through all of these. These are, again, date changes that look at all of those opportunities that were presented. Most importantly is that conservation, the light goose season at the end. We do shorten some of our seasons in order to take advantage of that light goose season to try to get some pressure on those birds to hopefully they'll ease up on the northern habitats. Looking at bag limits, the standard six birds in the bag. The one change, we did have liberalization of canvasback, so we went from 1 last year to 2 this year. The numbers are looking really good. The scalp keep bouncing around, and so we had 4 in the bag last year, and they pulled it back to 3 this year. But those are the only 2 changes that we've had in the duck bag limits at this point in time. Here is all of the other bag limits, but this is where I wanted to talk about what's going on with the possession limits. And this has been being discussed at the National Flyway Council level and within all of the 4 representative flyway councils for several years. And so really try to get some relief to the hunters that are traveling and to the other individuals that are running into possession limit issues. And so it's traditionally been 2 times the daily bag limit. I think we'll see some additional changes through time, but at this point they've offered a 3 times the daily bag limit for our late season birds, and we'd like to take advantage of that. And so with that, that is the nuts and bolts of our late waterfowl season, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
So it was the federal recommendation to do a 3 daily possession limit now.
Yes, sir.
I think it's awesome that they've come up with that, because we were always selling 3-day license, and it was a kind of an enforcement nightmare. So I think that's going to help us a lot.
Yeah, and it's a great example of the states working with the feds, because the states have been talking about this at the council level for a long time and just slowly working on it because it's such a traditional law that's been in place. And so, but we finally got it through this year. So we'll see that on all 4 flyways, which is a fantastic thing. Yes, sir.
So there's no problem crossing a state line with 3 times a bag limit? If I go to Arkansas and hunt, not from there.
Right. If you go to, there's a little glitch in our system right now, because Tennessee state law says you can't cross the state line with greater than 2 times your daily bag limit. So that's one of those things we'll have to work out. If you're in Arkansas and get 3 times your daily bag limit, it's not a problem. Only when you leave the state of Tennessee. So there's some house cleaning that I think a lot of states are going to see on these, but it doesn't impact the hunter at this point, except for somebody that comes to Tennessee and wants to cross that line. But hopefully in the next year we can get that cleaned up.
I'll make a motion to approve proclamation 13-11. Do I have a second? Got a second? Any discussion from the commission?
Ray, I have
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
that proclamation would be to open at Thanksgiving Day and run 60 consecutive days, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In my opinion, both for the quality of hunting and for the positive economic impacts is to have a split season, which would give us 2 open days. We open it on the 23rd, hunt the 24th, close it for 5 days, reopen it the Saturday after Thanksgiving. For most of us in Tennessee, a duck hunt's not a out the back door kind of hunt. We have to travel. Any duck east of Knoxville is lost. So we have to go west to find ducks, which translates to hotel nights and trips to the store to cook in the blind and buying extra food. And so the situation is, I would like to give consideration to having a split season.
Mr. Tigg, I know I'm not on this committee, but can I speak?
You're welcome to discuss.
Most of you know that I represent District 7, which is over in the Kentucky Lake, WMA, Camden, Barkley, Big Sandy, in that area. And this year the crops were flooded out, and at this time millet has been planted, and I have a lot of the hunters in that area call me a lot, and they would like to see the season go Thanksgiving Day to give that millet time to mature before the waters turn back in. So I'd like for the commission to consider the hunters in that area and their request as well. But it's been 100% that would like to see it on Thanksgiving Day. Thank you.
I originally made the motion with the understanding the proclamation's written as I made the motion to start on Thanksgiving, and I realize it's not a cut and dry situation. Obviously I've been thinking about this and trying to get as much information from the people I represent as possible, and I've almost unanimously heard to start at Thanksgiving and run it straight through. The main thing they didn't want to do was lose days, and it's something that comes along with the calendar on a very infrequent basis. I think that either way we went, there would be people who would see it differently. I think we're providing an opportunity for just as many people to enjoy this resource either way, with a lot of people being off the day after Thanksgiving. So that was where I based my opinion on, and that's why I made the motion to vote in this manner. I will. Anybody else from the commission have comments? Anybody from the audience concerning the waterfowl season?
Ask him to come up here and state his name.
Yes, sir. Please come to the mic right here and state your name, and if you care to, if you do represent any organization, you can say that. If not, just go ahead.
I'm just representing myself as a, is this on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as a birder. I see up here Virginia and Sora rails. Excuse my ignorance, but I have yet to see these birds everywhere we go birding, and yet you've got the largest possession and bag limit on these. How come? Who is eating them? Who is hunting them? Where are they finding them?
Okay. Gray, would you be best?
Yes, sir. I'm
Okay,
happy to
please
answer that.
question.
I mean, the soil rails are extraordinarily, we don't see them frequently in Tennessee, and I don't think there's many hunters pursuing them in Tennessee. The regulations that we see are federal frameworks that are allowed for each state, and so we just pass those down to our hunters. So There's not many people pursuing that resource at this time in our state, but there are other states that do see avid hunters.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Ken Debke, and I think I have good working knowledge of the distribution of all the birds in Tennessee, including the Virginia and Sora rails. And he hasn't looked in the right place. They're marsh birds, and I say very rarely are they ever shot by a hunter. In fact, as far as I know. And I would say that woodcock, which is another game species, would be easier to shoot than a rail. So all I want to do is clarify that, and I'll talk to him later where I can find some Virginian and Sora rails. Although I will kind of dispute how many Sora rails and Virginia rails are here in the wintertime. I think you'd have to talk to a man that concentrates on rails to tell us that. Real football would be probably one of the best places. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm David Patton. I'm from Chattanooga. I'd just like to agree with Commissioner Rice in that when you look at the statewide duck season, you're encompassing, a big state. And a lot of times, especially when you look at the bird flights over the last few years because of our kind of changing weather patterns, those last 4 days of the season, toward the end of January, are typically some of our better hunting days. And the other side of that equation is that first 4-day period right after Thanksgiving. Sometimes our hunting in Tennessee, especially around Thanksgiving, is not all that good anyway. So I would ask that you would consider the split season.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ripley.
I'm not sure with Commissioner Rice's suggestion, would the season extend as late as it would under the proposal?
It would. We're restricted by federal guidelines on how late the season can go, which is January 26th, which is a Sunday.
Okay.
So his discussion doesn't change the number of days. It's basically whether we start on a Thursday and go 60, or whether we don't hunt that Thursday and Friday and we in turn hunt the 2-day weekend before. We have the ability for 2 splits, and this proposal doesn't use one of the splits.
All right, thank you.
This vote obviously is just Wildlife Management Committee. All in favor of proclamation? Where am I? Excuse me. 13-11. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Proclamation passes. Thank you.
If I may, Commissioner,
Sure, go ahead.
moving on.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we completely close that proclamation, I'd like to bring up the topic of Sandhill cranes. There was discussion at the commission meeting 2 months ago in which we brought up the idea of creating a Sandhill crane hunting season in the state of Tennessee. This topic was brought up a few years ago, and there was much discussion amongst the public and amongst the commission, and it was more or less tabled for 2 years. And we, as an agency, were following our obligation to bring back the topic as directed by the commission 2 years ago. And so at the June commission meeting, we again breached the topic of potentially having a Sandhill crane season. One of the things that we introduced to everyone is that the process was followed as far as going through the federal government, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and requesting that they look into the potential of Tennessee having a Sandhill crane hunting season. That action really got a lot of gears in motion. And for something like that to go through, there's quite a review process, and Dr. Anderson can explain it in greater detail. But over the course of the last year and a half, there were numerous technical meetings of waterfowl biologists all across North America, which looked at the potential for Tennessee to host a sandhill crane hunting season if the commission decides to move forward with that. Recently, they handed down some of their guidelines as far as what the agency could go with if we were to initiate a sandhill crane season. And so we brought that topic up in front of the commission last June, 2 months ago, and talked about the potential of adding a sandhill crane season. Obviously, this commission meeting in August is when we passed the Migratory Bird Proclamation. And if a sandhill crane season is to be initiated, it would go inside this proclamation. So when we breached that topic 2 months ago, one of the things that we said we'd do, and we have done, is we opened up a public comment period for everyone to chime in and tell us their thoughts regarding a sandhill crane season. And if I may, before we start discussing that issue, I was just going to bring up some of the compiled facts from that public comment period. So what we did, following the June commission, which was in late June, we did a press release, and we more or less invited the public to provide comment on whether or not Tennessee should have a sandhill crane hunting season. Now, we ran that comment period from July 1st to August 10th. It was approximately a 6-week period, which is actually a little bit longer than we typically have a comment period open. Usually it's about a 30-day comment period, but given the situation, we felt it'd be good to have an extended comment period. So we had 6 weeks in which the public could contact the agency and tell us what their thoughts are regarding a sandhill crane season. Now, over that 6-week period, we gathered just over 1,000 comments. And as you can see here, there's the majority of the comments that came into the agency were in opposition to a sandhill crane hunting season. And so we did. This comment period was actually quite busy. Typically, we don't receive near as many comments, but this is definitely an issue that really sparked a lot of interest, not just from the opposition, but from the support as well. Now, what we did to compile all this information is we first off designated it as a letter in opposition or a letter in support of the sandhill crane hunting season. And so one of the things we did for both groups is we looked at the residency status of the folks that were commenting on the sandhill crane season. And right off the bat, for both opposition and support, there's about a third of them, which is indicated in this blue section. About a third of them, we couldn't tell if they were in state or out of state. They never identified themselves. They just gave their first name or last name. But for all the rest, we categorized it as being a Tennessee resident or not a Tennessee resident. And the opposition, as you can see, for every 2 letters that we received from Tennessee residents, we did receive a letter of opposition from out of state. Now, the other thing we did for both groups is we started seeing repetition in the letters that were coming in as far as why folks were in favor or why folks were opposed. And we tried to categorize this and get a good feeling of what the people were saying who were commenting. And the reasoning given, again, we're sticking with opposition right now. The reasoning given, about 22% of the folks that were in opposition to the sandhill crane season were mentioning biological reasons. And what we mean by that is that they didn't feel that the resource was strong enough to withstand a hunt. There was quite a large group of number, 33%, about 1 out of every 3 people writing in about opposition mentioned the threat of accidentally killing a whooping crane. Now, keep in mind, whooping cranes are endangered. They're in very, very low numbers in this eastern population. I believe there's just over 100 whooping cranes, and so there's very strong concern from the opposition that a whooping crane may be shot accidentally during a sandhill crane season. Almost 40% of the folks mentioned ecotourism or recreational. What we mean by that is they mentioned the sandhill Crane Festival that is hosted in the Birchwood area around Hiwassee Refuge every year, that it brings in a load of people to the state of Tennessee, and there's monies being spent in that area because of the cranes that are around that refuge. The largest number overall are just folks that wrote in and just say, no, don't hunt them. You shouldn't hunt sandhill cranes. They didn't really give a reason why we shouldn't hunt them, other than saying that no, they're generally opposed to hunting sandhill cranes. About 1 out of 10 mentioned a public survey that we had Responsive Management conduct a couple of months ago that measured it was a scientific survey that really looked at what the public opinion is in Tennessee regarding hunting sandhill cranes. And they mentioned that survey saying there's not a lot of support in the state of Tennessee to go forward with a sandhill crane season. And then there's quite a bit that had all obscure reasons, and we classify those as others. So in general, that's pretty much what we saw from all the opposition, all the comments that came in regarding sandhill cranes. Now, we did this exact same process for all the letters of support that we received for the crane season. And again, we looked at the residency, and as you can see, about a third of them, we could not identify if they're in-state or out-of-state. And the rest that were classified as in-state or out-of-state is vastly different. We saw about 30 in-state responses compared to 1 out-of-state response. And so primarily it was the Tennessee residents that were chiming in support. Now again, we looked at the reasoning of why people supported a sandhill crane season. We wanted to categorize it. Just like the opposition, there is a lot of mention about biological reasons. And the fact that this has been reviewed by waterfowl biologists all across North America, that the population could withstand it without doing any significant impact to the population. They mentioned that for biological purposes, it was completely fine to carry on a sandhill crane season. About 14% mentioned agricultural damage or depredation. This is when an animal, doesn't have to be a crane, but any animal comes in and eats a food crop or damages some type of agricultural production in an area. Quite a few people, just like the agricultural damage, quite a few people mentioned interspecies competition. And primarily what they talk about is, since the crane numbers have grown so large, they've pushed out other animals, other waterfowl, other geese, and they like to balance that out. They enjoyed seeing the other birds coming in, but the cranes are actually dominating the area right now. About 8% mentioned table fare because they liked that option of having that available. But just like the opposition, there is the biggest contingency of folks didn't say why they're opposed or supported. They more or less just wrote in and said, I support the season. And that's what we lumped together as general support. There was a fair number of folks that did mention economics, much like the economics of the Crane Festival. A number of people in support mentioned economics about having a hunt and the benefits of that hunt, or the fact that they would rather keep their money in Tennessee rather than go out of state to hunt these birds. And again, there was a whole bunch of folks that we really couldn't classify as being what their reasoning was. And so besides us collecting those public comments, and all those came in via email or handwritten letters, we actually did receive a couple of phone calls, and we documented that as well. But besides our agency gathering information, public opinion poll regarding sandhill crane season, we looked at all the major newspapers across the state of Tennessee. Pretty much every newspaper ran an article about sandhill crane, the proposed sandhill crane hunting season. The Commercial Appeal in Memphis had an article, but they did not post a poll. Same with Knoxville, they didn't have a poll in there. And the two major ones that had a sandhill crane poll were the Tennessean, which is the Nashville newspaper, and then the Chattanooga Times-Free Press, which is the Chattanooga newspaper. And with any type of poll that is not a scientific poll, it's a volunteer poll, you could have people call in and give their vote. It was actually quite surprising, very different results. The Tennessean, which had over 3,600 people take this poll, were 2-to-1 in support of a sandhill season, whereas the Chattanooga poll, which had just over 700 people, they were obviously overwhelmingly in opposition to this hunt. And so these were the polls. I told you all the information about the comments we received from the public regarding the Sandhill crane season. And these are the two newspapers that conducted a poll. And those are the facts of all the public comments that we received. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Gray.
What's, in your opinion, why is there such a stark difference in the two polls? I mean, do you think that from the Tennessee and being farther west, there's more waterfowl hunters?
It's impossible to say for sure. The good thing that I liked about this is we did check when these polls were put online. There was it was designed so you could not vote more than one time from a single computer. It recorded the ISP address. So someone couldn't go on there and vote 100 times. Obviously, they could go to 100 different computers and vote. Why the discrepancy, it's hard to tell. It could have been the way the articles were written to ask for public opinion, whether or not they gave more support. I don't know if the public was steered in any direction. I can't recall what either article said, but the fact of the matter is when you have public opinion polls that are volunteer and not scientific, they can be swayed one way or the other with just interest groups that want to get in. And I'm not saying it goes one way or the other in this situation, but public opinion polls that are open like that do have potential for a group to sway them one way or another.
Thank you.
And I guess, oh, go ahead.
Stan, obviously, everybody here, I'm thinking, has some opinion on this topic, and that's why the room's full, and that's why we've been deliberating and, looking at this issue so much. But I'd just like to remind everybody, whenever we start the discussion, please come to the mic, state your name, who you represent. We want to hear from everyone who wishes to speak or voice an opinion or concern. I would also, please limit your remarks to areas that have not been covered by previous speakers. If there's a need to clarify or a question, we'll get to it, but just please address myself and we'll answer it in the best possible way we can. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. I just wanted to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Darrell, the breakdowns on those letters don't add up to 100% because somebody could add 2 opposition. So if you're adding those up, it's the percentage of those people who actually responded in that letter to those things. So those numbers don't add up to 100. I was trying to signal him, but I couldn't get his attention to make sure that was clear. So. All right, I'm going to make, what we're going to talk about here should be short and sweet if it actually opens. There we go. This is obviously sort of the end of several years of work and process that we've been going through with public, with the biologists within our state, within the general public within our state, with the biologists across the Mississippi Flyway, the Atlantic Flyway. Both councils and Canada and Mexico have all gone through this entire process, and we've kind of reached an end at this point. And it really boils down to some real simple recommendations. What we looked at in June was what we actually requested out of the feds, which was the max number. Also knowing that we can, once the feds, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has said you can have, this can occur, we can then be more liberal, but we can't be, or more conservative, but we can't be more liberal. And so what we're recommending at this point is some conservatisms on what we've requested. What we're recommending at this point would be a season date from November 28th to the first day of January. We would go daylight instead of half an hour before daylight to get a good look at those birds to 3 p.m. Eastern to allow a temporal buffer. And then as recommended, this is the exact same. The zone of harvest would be east of Highway 56 and south of Interstate 40. The permit, we would look at, we're recommending at this point 400 packets of 300 permits each would be 1,200 permits out there. We're looking tentatively at this point to do a handheld draw. around October 19th. That gives us a chance to get everything squared up legally from our perspective and get everything done. It also gives the hunters plenty of chance after they're successfully drawn to get ready for that hunt come 5 weeks later. We will issue the leftover permits if there are any, first come, first serve at the regional offices. There is going to be required, and this is part of the whole federal plan, and this is to make sure we're monitoring our harvest and knowing exactly what's going on the entire eastern population. There will be a requirement to field check the animals, and then we'll have every animal will be checked in officially, and that will be done via business reply mail, so they can just simply drop their card in the mail and we will receive it. There's a end of year hunter diary that's also required, so we'll know exactly what's going on with each hunter that's out there. And that's again a federal requirement that allows us to keep a check on what's going on with the population and how many birds they've seen or harvested. One of the things that we saw out of the some of the early public opinion polls or the human dimensions polls is not a lot of people know what a crane is. And so we had a lot of people with confusion of herons and stuff like that. But one of the things that we really want to do is make sure people know they're looking at a sandhill crane. And so there's a lot of education that's going to go into this whole process. We're going to have, I think we've counted it up, either 6 or 7 opportunities to educate our hunters on exactly what's going on and making sure if we do have any kind of a issue with cross, other species, that they are well aware of these things. And so we're looking at a required test. You're going to have to pass it with 100%. Educational materials at the draw site, online, on the permit themselves. We're going to just inundate these people with information about what's going on and the whole sandhill crane process and any differentiation between other cranes or in some cases even snow geese get problematic. And with that is the basic gist of what the recommendation is at this time from the Wildlife Division.
Thank you. We have several people came forward in the weeks, days leading to this meeting that wanted to voice their opinion, make comments. So I'm going to try to navigate through this because some of them, the first one is, I guess, via internet. So I'm going to kind of call some of the people that I know want to speak, and then the other people can come forward. Are we ready?
You said the sign-in sheet would be coming around. It hasn't gotten this far.
Okay. We'll get it passed down there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Dr. Gray, you used the term daylight. Is that synonymous with sunrise?
Yes, sir. And so I was writing this kind of late last night on a plane, and sunset.
And would you state that for those that don't know, the normal waterfowl hunting season does open 30 minutes before daylight, and we're trying to allow better light for identification?
Correct. And that's one of the recommendations that, low light conditions half an hour before sunrise is the typical waterfowl hunting season time frame. But in order to get that more daylight on those birds so we can make sure we don't have any misidentification questions, we're going to start them half an hour after normal hours, which would be the official sunrise based on those sunrise sunset tables.
And this may have been said, I may not have heard it. Staff's proposal is 400 packets,
Yes,
3
sir.
permits each, and what was the feds allowing us
They
to
were
have?
allowing 775 with 3 permits each, which was 2325.
Thank you, sir.
I think if we're ready, we ready? Okay, we're going to take a short pause. TV pause.